but it's very hard to keep up.
Oops.
Very hard to keep up. And so I kind of am still concerned that the water rights at Zylstra are going to, again, to be addressed at some point, legally and otherwise, so that all of these swirling issues that have to do with the water there, that you can, we together, but you guys in particular, kind of wend your way through those issues and get to a really good place for a realistic management plan. So two things. One, a tiny complaint about the Eagle's Nest and the closure of the trail, which I think went on way too long. I have climbed a few trees in Alaska and banded bald eagle chicks. And bald eagles, I believe there may not even be ever a case of a bald eagle striking a human being. So maybe somebody can prove me wrong, but it's an incredibly rare thing that they even come within 20 feet of your head or whatever, unlike certain owls and goshawks and other birds that will strike you. So I thought it was closed much too long, and I hope to heck that we're not going to just continue to kind of respond to the least knowledgeable members of the public who feel frightened by a bird flying within 20 feet of them or something. So I'll just throw that out there. I just think that trail was closed a couple weeks at least too long, several weeks too long. And a lot of us were sort of scofflawing it. And the eagles weren't even there most of the last couple of weeks when I was walking the closed trail. So then a big positive. I wanted to say that on Zylstra, on the water issues, I so much enjoyed reading Doug McCutcheon's article in mid-July, I believe it was, on the cyanobacteria blooms. And it was so valuable because it was outreach that began to let anyone who was going to take the time to read that to begin to understand the complexity of those water quality and sediment and public safety and wildlife issues that are all wrapped up in those two water bodies there that we now in part own and will own into the future. And so, again, I am concerned about the whole business of water rights, because at some point after summers like we just had, it's going to become critical. And of course, the dam safety thing with dropping the level made it even more so. So you guys know all of this, but I want to just thank you for the great work you guys do. And I also want to let you know, I and others, I think, have our eye on this whole water quality, water volume thing as being pretty darn important at Zylstra. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Steve. Kathy Morris.
I had to unmute. A couple of months ago, I read a comment. I made a comment at the public part, and I haven't heard back from anybody. And at that point, the meeting wasn't being recorded. So I'm just going to remake this comment. It's very short. I just have to.
Okay.
So it is, my comment was, I'm wondering about the scientific part of the mandate that, and this kind of applies to what Steve was just talking about as far as the eagles. I'm wondering about the scientific part of the mandate. That is, the land bank is tasked with preserving into perpetuity properties with scientific value. Since science involves the pursuit of knowledge regarding the physical world, and pursuit of knowledge involves experimentation and inquiry, where is this happening on land bank land, and how is that knowledge disseminated to the general county population? I also added again that I'm curious about where you all are at with the CART report. If there's any more questions, we have an opportunity not only to do things differently, but to do things which may involve collaboration with multiple county entities, including the public. So I just wanted those recorded, and then I'm hoping, I'm not really sure like how I get a response back, or if someone's gonna write, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. for repeating that. I do remember you making that comment, and thanks for noting that it wasn't recorded and addressed yet. So if we can make a note in the minutes that these couple of issues have come up. I know we usually just have in the minutes, they say general public comments, and it would be good to outline the couple of issues that we need to follow back up on, so they don't get lost. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, does anyone else have a public comment to make? Any other members? Well, okay, I guess I'm not seeing any. All right, next up on the list would be to approve the August minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes from commissioners?
Nothing.
Well, then might be a first, and congratulations on doing incredible minutes, and the minutes are approved, and we'll just skate along. And as we do this, if we end up with some extra time, it would be later on in the meeting. It would be good to revisit the public comments we just had and see if Doug or someone could respond to them. For now, we'll just keep moving forward and see where we end up. So let's see, let's go to chair and commissioners reports. Are there any reports to be made? I don't have anything in particular. Is that Krista?
Yeah, I would just express my appreciation. I wasn't at the last meeting, but having the meetings recorded is great, because I was able to go back and listen to all that discussion. And so I appreciate having that available.
Great. Yes, it's a good tool for us as well as the public.
And I'll make a comment on transcriptions. I thought I was a fairly articulate person until I read the transcription of our conversation with the alums. And I'm just like, whoa, could I possibly complete a sentence? Anyway, I appreciate the transcript itself, and I will work to become more articulate in the future.
I think we all, and believe me, I left out a lot of the you knows, and it was everybody. It wasn't just you. We're just feeling our way along. Okay, so no other chair and commissioner reports. And is the phone call in Christine by chance, or would we still be waiting on her?
No, we got an email from Christine.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Okay, so then let's, before we move forward, then we've got about up to 20 minutes to address directly the public comments that we just received. Is Doug, maybe you want to start with Zylstra? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Doug is on vacation.
Oh, I thought.
Unless he's, oh no, there he is.
Okay.
Doug, you're supposed to be on vacation.
Now that's dedication.
I can start with a water rights question.
Okay. Sounds good.
So we are moving to resolve that question. We have a water rights attorney has been working on this, and there's a new grant program that was funded by the legislature. It's not yet online, but it should help us cover the costs of his fees and potentially the costs of doing any kind of retrofit we might need. But we have to wait until October, which is when the grant program actually should come online and we can apply, and hopefully we'll receive those funds and start moving forward with all of that. But we are intending to clarify that situation and come to some resolution on it. We'll see what the implications are for the water control structures, and hopefully if we can get that piece funded too, we can do the engineering studies that we're going to need and do the retrofit as necessary. So that's where that stands.
So regardless of whether we're successful in receiving the grant, we're moving forward with the water rights attorney and
Yep.
to nail down that piece.
Yeah,
Okay.
we were gonna
Be ni-
go, we've been thinking about that for some time, and I've been kind of going back and forth with him, and finally in the last conversation, he told me that I wasn't aware of the legislature's program that they funded on water rights for local communities. But he actually helped draft that, and so hopefully we can get it done and not pay a ton of money to do it.
Okay, sounds good. And if there are any other preserves where water rights could be sticky, maybe we can get that covered too. David, did you have your hand up?
Yes, Lincoln, is there any way to project how long it might take to resolve that question?
I would say it's going to take at least a year, because basically what needs to happen is we're going to submit a change application because we would like to put some of the water right volume into the water trust program that the state has, which enables you to maintain water rights regardless of whether you're actively using them or not. But in order to do that, the Department of Ecology is going to have to go through and review what the usage of the water rights, which at this point, the usage has been through Greg Black, who's been withdrawing water downstream. So they have to go through that process and come to a determination, and that just takes some time.
Okay, before we move on from that question, Steve, does that answer your question about where we're at with that?
Yes, it sure does. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Doug, thanks for joining from your vacation. Are you able to speak or respond to the Eagle? Yeah, see, Krista, the Eagle thing, the Eagle issue brought up about shutting the trail maybe longer than he thought was necessary.
Hi, yeah, I'll be responding as a member of the public since I'm on vacation. Yeah, so that was a complicated issue, and we reached out to wildlife managers and bird experts from around the area, and there was a pretty broad range of opinions. And really what we kind of defaulted to, well, I guess I should take a step back on that as well, that, I made an erroneous guess based on at the time of the original incident. I knew of 2 eagles that had fledged that very week. The eaglet had, full flight feathers and was pretty active moving around in the nest. So we just kind of made the assumption that it would probably be, 1 or 2 weeks before maybe that eaglet might be ready to start at least flight. And that ended up not being the case. It ended up being, 4 or 5 weeks additional. and then another couple of weeks before the eaglet left the area. So the other part of that, yeah, just in terms of our management decision, it was less, I would say, about the danger to the public, which also seemed pretty low, and really more about wildlife disturbance. And it was, the preserve itself remained open during that time. It was just that one side which was closed to public access, and it just seemed like a pretty easy thing for us to do, to ask people to just back off and give wildlife some space. We didn't really know for certain that it was related to the fledging. There's some speculation that it may have been related to food related things. So in any case, it just was a real precautionary step. And moving forward, there's debate about what we should do long term, but our plan at this point is to kind of monitor the situation going into the future, and see if we can do some additional kind of longer term landscapey type things to reduce kind of any potential impacts that might be happening on that side of the property. Is that helpful?
That is helpful. I think we'll see what Steve says. I guess one question before we hear from him was that story conveyed to the public? And I'm just wondering how Steve said that it was talked about, that it was danger from diving birds. And I'm wondering if the precautionary for wildlife aspect was how it was communicated to the public. Because
yeah, I think in the press releases that Tanya pulled together, that was, and with our signage it was on there, but we opted to downplay or not really downplay, but emphasize the public safety side of things as a means to kind of get people's
scare tactic.
Well, not so much that,
Yeah,
but just
yeah.
at least get their attention. People don't read signs. I don't know if you've noticed this. So, putting out a plain white sign that says, please respect wildlife is not going to get as much attention as something that's bright red and says caution. So, you can't say caution, give wildlife space because they need it. That doesn't translate as well as caution, danger, that sort of thing, to actually, kind of get somebody's attention. So,
Steve, can you respond to that, or maybe give any suggestions for next time around what you would like to see it handled?
Well, I very much appreciate that opportunity, Sandy. And the other thing, Doug, is thank you for your usual thorough answer. And you could be a politician very easily once you get tired of doing all the work you do. But the thing is I guess I like the idea of maybe creating a little barriers there or something, so that the public can continue to use the trail as long as possible, because it is a key trail. I mean, the loop trail is the loop trail. And that, this whole idea that a particular nest of an unendangered species, of a common species, of a species that's almost as common as our local honkers here, is stretching credulity just a little bit. But I understand the balance you're trying to achieve, and maybe some landscaping, something like that, would help alleviate the situation if that pair continues to nest in that tree. But so thank you very much. Again, it's a little bit of a small criticism that I needed to let out, but good answers. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again for bringing that question and comment forward. If we could move on to Kathy's, I think there was a dual statement question, but the one about the scientific part of our mandate, preserving areas of scientific value. And her question is, where is the science being done and disseminate to the public. And we may not be able to answer that right at this moment, but want to give an opportunity for that. I see Peter has raised his hand. Yeah.
Morning, everyone. I guess I can't speak broadly about the land bank's educational efforts, but at least on Orcas, I would like to make more efforts to communicate what we're doing and hoping and planning to do that. But just for Kathy, a few examples of things that are going on in terms of trying to do some science on the preserves. We've got ongoing informal things with Quiot. We're kicking off kind of a oak biochar research project on turtleback that involves Western Washington University and the Conservation District. We're looking at future collaboration, monitoring the stream that flows from Coffelt Farm Preserve down to Judd Cove Preserve, also with the Conservation District and other partners. And then, we're moving towards some forest management demonstration projects on turtleback, and all of those, I think we will be reaching out to the public and sharing what we're doing and results, hopefully. So there's always more we can do, but that's kind of a little update from Orcas.
Can I just ask? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, you know what, Kathy, can we see what Doug has to say and then see if there's any other, and then we'll go back to you.
Yeah.
Doug, do you have something to report from San Juan on that front?
Yeah, that is a really interesting one. So much of our other parts of our mandate are a little bit more specific and easy to translate. The scientific one, most of the way that happens is actually outside groups that kind of use land bank properties as a platform, as Peter just gave some really good examples. And a lot of that tends to be universities. Sometimes that's high school. And occasionally it's other groups. Particularly, comes to mind are things on San Juan where various whale research groups use the properties as platforms for some of their work. So it's on occasion we are doing some of the work ourselves, but more often than not, we're sort of the platform where other people are doing that work. And as such, since it's not our work, our research, it's not something that is usually conveyed. Something that we've always requested when we do grant research permission is for that information to be shared back with us. And Eliza usually coordinates that into things. And I don't know if she's on today, but she could kind of give a little more background on this, that even though it's a requirement, and even though we're in contact during the research, the findings usually don't come out for some period of time. And I would say that maybe at least half the time we end up not getting the information back. Grad students or whoever have moved on and have published and done their thing and kind of forgot about us as one of their platforms. So there's a tremendous amount of research that has happened on our properties. And on the agricultural front, worth mentioning, the WSU extension has been doing trials here on San Juan, both with, I don't know the details inside and out. Charlie'd be a better person for that. But they've been doing some trial work for different improvements to agricultural lands here on San Juan for the last several years as well. So, thanks. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Kathy.
Yeah, well, it's that dissemination point, and also engaging the public more with these trials, and what are you looking for? Like, I was part of the WSU one. There was no preliminary take, or I haven't heard back. It's just like a seeder came in and planted some seeds and then went away. But I think that I have to think of like the entire county as a watershed Like all the water that's falling right now is going through people's property, going from land bank property to other people's property. And what they do affects what happens when it ends up in Judd Cove or any place else. And so how do we help influence proper management of properties in riparian areas? I mean, I'm still aghast that Roundup is sold in hardware stores here when we know the dangers of that. And actually people in the Preservation Trust say, well, sometimes you just have to use herbicides, where is like, is there some way to start gleaning some of this information that people are doing elsewhere to improve water holding qualities of land, and like rewilding some of these riparian areas? Like, it's not bad to rewild things, and how that might influence some of the agricultural lands next to it. So I'm curious about things. I'm really curious about things. And I went over and saw the WSU thing, and it was basically a fertilizer experiment, which, okay, but how do we get that? I'm curious about things. I want to know things more. And I just feel like there's all these lands that are under your care. And it was like, wow, what can we learn and how can we disseminate that? I heard a great quote. I'm just going to say it, that soil science, learning about the soil, is a kind of the gateway drug to climate optimism. And I think in this day and age, I think our youth really need some optimistic science out there that's telling them they're not going to die in 60 years. That's what that's what the UN says about, we have 60 harvests left, probably 57 now. But
So Kathy, what specifically do you think the land bank should be doing that we're not doing?
Specifically, I think we should be engaging more ongoing public information about like regenerative agriculture, learning. There's, regenerative agriculture is like an iceberg. There's all different things that go into that. And it also creeps into many different aspects of climate activism. So getting people to engage in the land, to connect with the land, not just connect by watching a video, but to connect with the land, to see not just youth, but all age groups digging in the land, like having access to land. And so I just feel like there's a way to do this with some of the collaborations. And I think some of those things were addressed in the CART report.
So in Doug's example of students that come from a university somewhere and do some type of research project on land bank lands, and then they go back to their campus and they do whatever they do with their findings, they don't necessarily close the loop with us on that. I don't know how prevalent that is, but that seems pretty likely that happens. What are we supposed to do about that? I mean, I agree with the broader value you're expressing, but I want to hear the specific work item that should come from this that goes to a land bank staff person, if any.
Well, I think if you read the CART report, there's a lot of examples of ways to engage. And you're talking about engagement. And so things were addressed. I mean, you just kind of asked a really huge question, like, what can we do? Well, you guys have the land, and part of, you can justify some expenditures in that direction for the scientific purpose and for the dissemination of that information to the general public. That just doesn't happen because a university student from Pullman comes here that goes back to Pullman, and what their research is might not make any sense. But even simpler science, just having access to land and understanding the carbon cycle, or understanding photosynthesis in a like an appreciation for photosynthesis, like kids carving in wood and then realizing, wow, that carbon in that wood was once atmospheric carbon. And that happens through a whole life cycle that happens under the ground. That is very interesting to kids when you start talking to them about it. How composting, how your food waste can also be integrated on the ground. It's just like this huge area of information that, I just feel like we need some optimistic science for everybody. And you guys are major landholders. So.
Well, I'll say that on Lopez, the Lopez School does a really good job of using Lopez Hill as a resource for education. So they have they do a bunch of different projects out there that I think it's not an agricultural setting, but it is kids out there getting their hands dirty and learning about ecosystem processes. So I think that's a good partnership, and it is a resource that the school's able to use, but the research part of it is directed by the teachers. So I think as long as we're finding partners that are open to that, it's definitely a good use of the land.
Great. Thank you. So with that, we are right on time to switched. We have Kai Litch here all the way from London with his tie on. Look at that. And he's going to give a presentation of the results from the Polis community conversation for the land bank this summer. So take it away, Kai.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to give a brief report on the conversation that we had in the islands on the land bank and issues of land use and land conservation. And I have a few images if we can share. 1 second. Is that working?
We got it.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so first I'll start with just the demographics of the respondents. So some statements we included in the conversation were not about opinions on the land bank, but they were about the demographics of the respondents. And so all these demographics were self-reported by respondents. And so we got a pretty rough breakdown of the demographics because there's random weighting of the comments that come through participants. Not everybody got to vote on these demographics statements, but there was about 2% missing. So a pretty rough idea of the demographics. So a pretty even breakdown based on population between the islands, 44% on San Juan, 33% on Orcas, 16% on Lopez, and 2% on Shaw. And then some more information owning real estate, primary residence, and registered to vote. And then 27% attended land bank meetings and 21% volunteered with the land bank. So it's clear it's not exactly a representative sample, but we're not making any statements that assume it is. And that's a pretty expected breakdown with a survey that's run in partnership with an organization. So first I'm going to talk through some opinion groups. If you took the survey, you'll recognize this graphic that was shown below the conversation as participants were taking it. And so this is automatically generated by Polis. And it basically just groups participants in groups with people who voted similarly to them. So group A on the right there had 266 members. And this group was really pro-land banks. They believed in the importance and continued relevance of the land bank, that the institution listens to the served community, effectively manages, preserves, and retains transparency and direction. And then group B on the other side had 96 members and believed that the land bank is irrelevant and unresponsive, inefficiently run, that preserves are poorly managed, and the institution lacks transparency and accountability. And so statements that define these two groups, we were generally looking at 80+% agreement. And so any percentages that I refer to or that are shown reflect those of the total respondent population who voted on those statements. So not everybody finished their survey and statements were given in a random order. So no one voted on all the statements. So percentages are the percentage of the population who agreed with that statement. And all the percentages and all the statements can be available in the data report. So we can make that available afterwards if you want to look through. So these two groups really represent two sets of statements that were submitted to the conversation. One that's highly favorable of the land bank as an operating institution, and one set that's highly critical. And so these really identify stakeholder groups that we were expected to be participating in the conversation. So although these groups are highly polarized, they're also very varying allegiances and criticisms, and areas where these two groups agree. And so looking further into opinion groups, we used a dimensionality reduction technique called PCA. And so looking at voters who voted more than 7 times in the conversation, we were able to analyze the data and kind of look for more nuanced opinion groups that exist within the community. And so this PCA image here shows colored dots represent participants who voted similarly. So that's kind of the distribution of opinions in the conversation. And then we kind of sifted through that to find really the most clearly defined ones that we can really get insight from. So the first opinion group is that blue cluster shown at the bottom there. And this group believes in a minimal role for the land bank on specific issues. So they disagree that the land bank should actively manage for wildfire risk, using canopy thinning or brown and ladder fuel reduction. So they disagree with that, and they disagree that the land bank should focus on buying land for federal and state managers. So this statement here, statement 82, red represents disagreement and blue represents agreement. And so looking at analysis of voters who voted more than 7 times, it clumps them based on how similarly they voted across all statements. That blue group in the middle is what we look at and how we define that opinion group. This opinion group also defined itself with voting behavior with regard to land bank commission. So they strongly disagreed that there needs to be more diverse representation on the commission, including a sustainable farmer or indigenous representation. And so group 2 we identified in PCA is this upper left quadrant group. And their support for the land bank was apparent in statements that they disagree that there's a lack of transparency or any conflict of interest that exists in land bank decision processes. They disagree that there should be a change of leadership at the land bank, or that land bank commissioners act like board members of a for-profit land management company. So those are the 2 main, more nuanced opinion groups that we found that existed between those A and B groups that were originally defined. And this upper left quadrant also kind of split one more time down the middle, and that was really specifically on agricultural issues. So one group strongly believes that the land bank has the appropriate knowledge and skill set to oversee agricultural operations, and the other strongly disagreed with that statement. So yeah, moving on from opinion groups, really the goal of this discussion, this survey, was to find points of consensus, supermajority agreement, and majority agreement, things that the community collectively agrees the land bank could focus on, and really look for progressive change on. So the first one was of organizational transparency and community engagement. And so this theme appeared quite often in the number of statements that were submitted, and also in the percentage of agreement on statements. So 5 statements called for greater organizational transparency, stating that further opportunities for community involvement and greater insight into the processes that happen in the commission and in leadership, that really greater insight is necessary. The simple statement of this idea was the land bank should operate with transparency, and that statement drew the highest percentage of agree votes in the conversation. So 94% of people who saw that statement agreed with it. Generally, suggestions for greater involvement is that they should be more responsive to the community ideas they receive, that there should be greater opportunities for youth education, more visible and engaging leadership, and really an ever-evolving role for the land bank in the community, so it continues to be responsive as it evolves. The second point of consensus or majority agreement we found was with regard to preservation and public access. So there was really consistent agreement that public access and recreation should remain a key part of what the land bank does. Expanding trail networks and continuing to provide opportunities for recreation, just being outside, was strongly agreed on, generally 90% plus agreement on those statements. And then with regard to preservation, majorities believed that natural resource stewardship should be central to all land bank property management and acquisitions, and that protecting land for native plants and animals should remain a high priority for the land bank's mandate and work. Then moving on to property management, one key issue here was agriculture. And so although there was a lot of indecisiveness within agriculture, generally agricultural statements had 30% agreeing that agriculture should continue, 30% disagreeing, and then 30% unsure. So high pass rates, and really a split decision. There was not really any other topic that showed that kind of breakdown, really indicated that really further discussion and information is needed on agriculture. But within that, there were areas of agreement where we saw majorities. They generally agreed that streamside forest buffers should be protected or planted on every land bank preserve. That agriculture that has encroached on wetlands or streams or other watershed sources should be rewilded, and that some farmed areas should be restored to native habitat. Generally, with a wider lens on agriculture, it was just generally believed that it should be done with extreme caution because of the conflict that exists between, short-term profit and resource damage. And finally, a clear point of consensus agreement was with regard to diverse representation. So people believe that the land bank needs more diverse representation, and this needs to be in the form of indigenous representation, as well as an organic, sustainable, or regenerative farmer on the commission. So finally, we can look at areas of uncertainty, and so these were the highest pass rates. So when someone sees a statement in the conversation, you can either agree, disagree, or pass, as I'm sure you guys experienced. And so these were the highest levels of pass that really demonstrate a need for further education and outreach and further discussion on issues. So this was regard to water, resource protection, the mandate, whether the land bank should do more work on non-ferry served islands, there should be a change of leadership, and then just about the percentage that the real estate excise tax is. But generally, as I'm sure I expected and many expected, there is broad support for the land bank as an organization going forward. Many statements saying they're critical for maintaining life, maintaining the magic of the islands, continuing to preserve land in perpetuity is really important. And, I think a good statement of this idea was, although imperfect, the land bank remains steady, relevant, and responsive in the complex task of providing conservation and public access in the islands. And that was 85% agreement. Yeah, so that's kind of a brief synopsis of what we found in the discussion. And I've written a full report on this, and the full data statistics are available. I think we can send it out in an email, or it'll be on the land bank website to read through and look for yourselves. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kai, for coming to us with that idea, and also for following through so diligently, detailed, and fantastic report. So let's open it up for questions or comments for Kai. From any commissioners or staff, or?
I have several.
Yes.
I'll just throw out a couple, Kai.
Yeah.
I guess my general sense, I've read through this a couple times, and I've tried to, I've made sense of a lot of it, but I'm kind of wondering, just in general, we have the group A and we have group B, and then you further delineate group 1 and 2. Is that 1 and 2 a division of the total number of respondents, just a different grouping? And then within that group 2, then you have 2 more subs. So those are still, that's a subgroup of a group that was part of the total number of respondents.
Yeah, so the principal component analysis was ran on every respondent that voted more than 7 times. And I think that was 97% of respondents. So right, group A and B split the whole population, and then group 1 and 2 split the whole population, and group A and B within group 1 and 2 was within that group. So that upper left quadrant was split. So that was, that same, sorry, I didn't explain that very well, but the same respondents were grouped every time. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's just a lot. It's going to take me a while to digest that, but I just want to make sure I'm chewing on the right thing while I go forward towards that. So the other thing, you make a comment just now. You made a comment on organizational transparency, that the land bank needs more transparency, and yet the statement itself reads it should operate with transparency. So there's an agreement. The statement isn't asking for more transparency. So I guess I get a little uncomfortable interpreting that as we need. I'm not saying we don't need more, but the statement doesn't say we need more. The statement says that's how we should operate, and most of the people agree, 94% agreed that we operate with transparency is how I read that, not that we need more transparency.
Right. So the 94% agreement was that the land bank should operate with transparency. Any interpretation, I don't know specifically what you're referring to, but we're taking what was taken from respondents' words. So
Okay.
I wasn't making any claims. All the words I used were taken directly from the survey.
Okay. I just thought you said more just during this discussion, but I made a note to myself that should is not more. I'm just trying to clarify. And then the last thing, on the diverse representation, when you say these statements receive majority support, and yet the first statement, only 48% agreed
Right.
that we need more diverse representation. So how does that get interpreted as the majority when it's only 48%?
It's because there's pass rates. So the majority, I'm interpreting as there was a greater percent who agreed with the statement than disagreed with the statement. So I think that statement had 48% agreement, and maybe I'd have to look, but somewhere in the 20s%. So a majority is compared to those who disagreed, and it's excluding those who passed on the statement.
So it got the largest number, but it didn't get over 50% agreement, but the largest number out of the responses.
Correct.
Agreed. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, Jim?
I have a question about, is there anything built into your survey to either quantify or identify the general public's knowledge of how the land bank works? Or, I mean, I have a pretty good sense that a lot of people out there that like to criticize the land bank for whatever reason aren't fully necessarily informed about how the land bank does its work, or doesn't ever come to meetings or things like that. So I mean, there's a lot of potential for a misunderstanding by people in general because they have not educated themselves.
Yeah.
And it seems like that could be a pretty wide factor in skewing results of something like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if skewing is the right word, because it's about the opinions that exist within the community. What we did do is at least preliminary, most of the respondents were accessing the survey through the Sounder. And so included in the Sounder article, we gave background information that included the land bank and some general background information on the land bank and the mandate, sorry. So we tried to give as much as we can, and then we included those demographic statements with regard to if they attended land bank meetings or volunteered. That's really all the information we could gather on how much they knew about the land bank going into it. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question, and I don't have the percentage right in front of me, but one of the majority or super majority you had said was for around preservation and public access. And when I was reading the results, drilling down into the links that you had that would show the raw data. One of the things that was surprising to me was that regardless of whether you were in group A or group B, that the majority really agreed on the statement, protect more land for habitat, conservation, plants and animals, and also focus on protecting the resource over public access or farming. And I kept seeing a large majority voting for or agreeing with statements such as some areas that public access was actually less important than protecting the habitat and the resources and potable water and wildlife and all of these things. And I found that really interesting, but I didn't see that really emphasized in the conclusion report. So I just, since
Yeah,
it,
I mean, we did, yeah, thank you. We
yeah,
did address it in a paragraph. I think it was 57% agreed that um, preserves and habitat preservation should be prioritized over public access. Um, and I think 66% thought that public access should continue, but it should be limited to low intensity activities. But then it was in the 80s that people were agreeing that trails should be expanded and public access should remain a priority. And so really we couldn't make any clear conclusions on that, because although 57% said there should be a priority of habitat protection, there's also really strong support for statements with regard to public access.
got
So it seemed a bit indecisive to make strong claims on. But yes,
yes,
there's a paragraph that exists in the report that went over that.
okay,
There's yeah.
got it. Right, so really they're not mutually exclusive. You can
Right.
believe in public access, but also feel a priority. It felt to me that it was first and foremost, protect the resource, but do allow public access carefully and as long as it doesn't interfere.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Other questions or comments from Kai? Can we, let's see, how are we doing? We've got a few more minutes here. I'm curious if there were any members of the public that maybe have a question for Kai on the results, or maybe Kai would be available afterwards with any follow-up questions. I don't want to I know your project is
No, yeah, I'm
done and
happy
you're in
happy
school,
to
but if more questions came up, would you be open to
certainly, yeah, email me.
clarifying? Okay, all right. So, yes, Steve.
So Kai, very impressive. It's one of the things that makes this such a wonderful place to live, that we have people like all of you arrayed here and young people like yourself. I wonder what you think in general about the sample size of people who participated in our county population.
Yeah, so we ended up with about 410 participants. And so looking at other conversations that have been run, Polis has been used in cities of 100, 200,000 people. And generally across all surveys, it sits about 2-3% engagement is good engagement levels. So really we were sitting well within that range in some of the largest percentage-wise of population democratic discussions that have happened. So based on the population size, we concluded that we had good engagement levels. And additionally, looking at the percentage of comments people responded to, we were a lot higher than a lot of conversations that have happened with Polis. So about, I think it was 80 statements average was the number of statements people responded to, which was really good engagement levels on that front as well.
Great.
Hey, Kai, good work. This is really helpful, I think, for us. There's always that question of what people are thinking about what's important. So this is right on. I'm curious too about the population that responded, because it's separated into these two groups. Mm-hmm. And just from your knowledge of this type of survey and how it's used in other places, generally, I guess the two extreme ends of an issue are the ones that tend to be the most vocal about it, and that middle population tends to be the most quiet. So I'm wondering if that grouping that we're seeing of some of these majority groups and subgroups within those is a result of just based on what you know, this type of sampling, if it's more likely to pick up two ends of something that are opposition versus the more moderate middle.
Yeah, I mean, it is more likely to pick them up just because it's a lot easier for the program to identify that. One of the the ideas behind this is that it tries to counteract that effect where the strongest, the loudest talking people dominate a conversation. And originally that was the mission behind it, is that, you know, in normal town halls, people with the extreme views get the most attention, and the people who kind of fall in between get lost in the discussion. And so that's why it's run digitally, so that, you know, all minority opinions can be preserved. And so, yeah, because those two initial opinion groups are automatically generated by a program, it does tend to pick up extreme ends. In other conversations, though, it does pick up, it's usually about 4 opinion groups. And so this was a bit unique that those two extremes were really prevalent. And that's kind of why we went further and did more PCA analysis to try and look more at those more nuanced opinion groups that existed. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you again, Kai. I think it's really interesting and going to be useful for us, and also gives us areas to focus on and where we need to do more work and education as well. So, yeah, Lincoln.
Kai, you're going to do a press release or something like that
Yeah.
on this? Okay, that's great. We'll look forward to that. And as in the report, you'll provide the links to the data, and the individual questions and that kind of thing too, right?
Yeah, so all the statements that were submitted, including the ones that were moderated out by me that weren't included, are available, and all the data statistics on the statements are available. Yeah, and I'll include links to that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for a very professional job.
Great work.
Thanks.
Okay, so with that, we will go into Lincoln's presentation regarding budget proposals.
All right, well, this is the first of our 2 budget proposals we're going to be considering. This is one of the things that happens where we have amended budgets through the course of the year, typically to accommodate acquisition projects. But in some cases, it's something else. And in this case, it's mostly about stewardship projects. And we're going to be looking at the biennial budget after this. So just getting into this first thing, I'm going to share my screen. You can all see this, I take it.
Yes.
Lincoln, can you enlarge it a little bit, please?
I will do my best. How's that? Was it not good enough, Brian?
Yeah, it's
about
better.
that?
I feel like it's an optometrist test. Yeah, good.
Right.
Thank you.
That's what we're going for. So the first thing to note is that we are changing the rate estimate. We had 3 million, which we knew was going to be quite low. We're increasing that to 5.5. We'll probably beat that, but this is still, I think, a realistic estimate of the REIT revenue. That's one of the big changes. Note that we haven't included any other acquisition projects in this 4th amended budget. We talked about doing that. We've got some projects clearly that are in the works, but we didn't have anything which we thought was far enough along to really put into a budget form. In other words, we didn't have a purchase and sale agreement or anything along those lines. So we didn't add any of those. We do have the last one that we put in, the Higgins property, in the 3rd amended budget. So I think that the number to focus on here really is the restricted acquisition reserves. That's the amount of money we anticipate having at the end of the year under this current scenario. in the conservation area fund. So if another project comes along between now and the end of the year, we'll be drawing down that number. So we do have some room to do some projects. That's what that's telling us. The big change really is in the stewardship budget, where you can see this number here, the 143,000 for management and maintenance. And this is basically what we're talking about here. We're buying some equipment. We need some additional trailers, tilting and dump trailers. And we're also doing a lot more at Beaverton Marsh with assessments as we work toward getting our management plan done and getting that preserve ultimately open to the public. We had a road repair at Fisherman Bay Spit. So that accounts for that increase in the stewardship budget. And that's really all we've got going in this particular round. So I'll take questions.
Jim?
This question is primarily for Sandy, and because it relates to the bump up in projected REIT revenue. Can you give us a little a rough update on the real estate market, and where we are going forward?
Our inventory is still relatively low, but it's significantly higher than it was a couple of months ago. Although the number,
people are figuring out that it's a seller's market and putting their houses on.
yes, that has we are seeing a kind of feels like a mass exodus, but it's not. But even some iconic properties. I think we have 4 different large farms available for sale on Orcas, and usually, that's pretty unusual. Usually it might be 1 or 2. So the sense is that that those who have thought about it in the future are finally coming around to going ahead and selling when they feel the market is at the height. And there continues to be buyers, but it's mostly for waterfront property. I think a big bump up isn't just the numbers of sales, but it's the average and median sale price. The prices are up significantly. We also have some, so not just the average prices are up, but it's some very high-end properties. For example, the Oprah $14 million sale. We've just learned that the Rosario Resort, which has been offered on the market this spring, is either under contract or close to being under contract as of a week ago. With a buyer, we don't know what that amount is. There's been a speculation that it's in the $30 million range, but I have no way of knowing if that's if that's accurate. So that will be a big bump. There's also some businesses that are for sale that are in the multi-millions. So it is just continuing. Where we'll be a year from now, I don't know, but so far things have been appreciating about on average 10% a year, and in some cases much higher than that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Lincoln on this first part of the budget proposal? So I have a question, Lincoln. We're only talking about, we're not into the 22 and 23 yet. We're just now focused on 2021.
Right.
Okay. Right. Let's see. Okay, so this large stewardship spreadsheet is for the future years.
Correct.
Never mind then. So we don't really have it drilled down. So what I'm curious about, I think I'll wait until we get to the next step, 22 and 23.
Great. So I think the next step would be to do the public hearing on the Fourth
On
Amendment.
this one.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so with that, we'll open it up to any questions from the public on this fourth amended budget amended for the rest of 2021. Do we have any questions or comments? We do not. Okay, is there a motion to approve this fourth amended 2021 budget? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Or any opposed? Okay, the fourth amended 2021 budget as presented has been approved. Thank you.
All right, ready to move on to the 2022 to 23 biennial adventure and budgeting. Very good. So here we are, Conservation Area Fund for 22 and 23. And you can see the proposed amended budget that you just passed. So one of the things we do pretty commonly is push that REIT number down again, just anticipating some potential downturn. Is that a realistic number? I don't know. I think it's conservative, so I doubt we'll be under that, but this is just the way we like to start this process. And we can adjust it upward as we go along and see what happens through the course of the year. So again, with this one, we don't have any acquisition projects other than the ones we're carrying over from previous years. And I'll get into that in a second. But with that, without any of those projects in there, and obviously we know we're considering some, the restricted acquisition reserves number is the cash flow number that you want to be focused on. So Brian's really looking very closely at this screen. Can you see this, Brian, or do I need to?
Yes, I am, but if you can enlarge it one blip, that would be helpful.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right. Let's try that.
Too much. Now we can't see the whole screen.
Yeah, I know. That's the trade-off. So
Last one, go.
I can go down again, but this is the number
Brian?
we're talking about.
That's good, thanks.
So I don't know if you have any questions about that. These are the two that this is the one project we've got that's we'll be paying off the last of the Double R Bar Ranch conservation easement next year. I will note that in here, we do have revenue coming in from sale of land, and that's for the sale of a conservation easement to the Preservation Trust on that the 2022 number is for Lopez Hill Preserve, where we're selling a conservation easement there. And then for the 2023, that's for sale of a conservation easement to the Preservation Trust on the Katy Mountain Development property, which we purchased earlier this year. So we're expecting those revenues to come back from the trust on those two things. All right, let's see here. I'm going to go down, unless there are questions on the Conservation Area Fund.
Jim. Jim has a question.
Is it what's the reasoning behind such small potential numbers for acquisition costs in 2022 and 2023? Should we, is that prudent of us to have those low numbers, or should we project for some acquisitions?
Well, I think that's always an open question. In some cases, we've kind of led an acquisition with an idea about how much it might cost. But the reality is the big one or one or two that we have out there, we don't really have a good sense of what the cost is going to be. We did just get the appraisal in on the Glenwood Inn property, which I sent to you all yesterday, or actually to some of you yesterday. But that's just an appraisal, frankly. And so that for that particular transaction, it's almost certainly going to be listed. We don't know what the purchase price is going to be. And so it's difficult for us to budget. Even if we put in, we originally had, I think, 2.1 million for that acquisition. Even if we had that in there and then we needed to spend 2.5 million, let's say, we'd have to go back and do another budget. So the thinking is you just need to look at that, this number, the restricted acquisition reserves, to understand how much you've got to work with going forward, which is pretty significant. So as we come back to those projects, we're just going to have to do an amended budget. There's no way around it. In fact, we may have to do a fifth amended for 2021. That's definitely possible. But without that, you're just looking at that reserve number.
So we haven't normally done biennial budgets, correct? That's a new thing with the county.
We did. This is our second biennial budget.
Okay,
so
is this, did we undershoot or, consciously undershoot in the previous one in terms of acquisitions? I'm just, it just seems like over the last few years, we're consistently, somewhere around 3 or 4 million in acquisitions, and yet we're only putting forth $250,000 or less going forward. I don't know. I guess it depends on what you look at in terms of budgeting and what you hope to get out of it, what we hope to get out of it, what we hope to have the council get out of it. But I just think it's unrealistic to think that we're not going to be projecting for acquisitions.
Well, and I don't think that's what this is saying necessarily. Our issue is that in order to put a number in there for acquisitions, that it needs to be tied to a specific project. And if we don't have a solid number to ascribe to a specific project, then it's either you're putting a number out there and you're having to convey the message to the seller that, gee, we've got this number in there, but don't expect to get that much money, or we're undershooting and we're going to have to come back to it anyway. So
that seems to apply to only this category of entry into the budget, whereas we are taking stabs in other areas that are unmaterially substantiated.
Yep, Lincoln, why would we have to tie it to a specific acquisition and not be able to say, well, here's what we have budgeted for districts 1, 2, and 3, knowing it can change? Why do we have to list out a specific project?
I think in, sorry, Krista.
Sorry, I shouldn't mute. I'm just thinking, I thought the council required that. I thought when we submit a budget, we have to detail and have an acquisition plan on specific properties, and they can either approve the whole budget with those acquisitions in there, or they decline the whole budget. But my recollection is that when we put something in the acquisition line, we have a document that supports the acquisition, the property, with a description of the property, its size, its conservation qualities, all those preliminary. I thought that's what we always attached once we put an acquisition number into one of those lines.
Yes. But what I'm saying is that there are other elements of this budget, of these proposed budgets, that are not substantiated by a particular project. There, I mean, like we're just bumping up the REIT revenue. That's just because we think it's going to be, the way that's looking, we think it's going to be higher. But it's still that's the whole idea of a budget, is to project as accurately as you can what's going to happen. I mean, that's the way I've always looked at budgets. And I feel like we're doing those sort of projections on the revenue side, but on the expenditure side, we're not.
Well, we will be talking about this a little bit later in executive session when we look at the projections through 2026. And the reason we're doing that in executive session is that we have specific numbers tied to specific projects, even though we don't have a purchase and sale agreement or anything along those lines. That will give you an idea of where we are or could be if we do those suite of projects. But unfortunately, at this point, I'm very hesitant to throw a number out there at I don't think the council would accept us throwing a general number out there and just saying, well, just budget us for, 2 million and we'll tell you what it's going to be about later. That it's never worked like that. But you as Land Bank Commission will have the opportunity to take a look at some projections with some specific numbers later in this meeting.
So can you confirm what Krista just stated? Is that how it works?
That's correct. We have to do a project proposal. And the idea has been in the past, one of the provisions for the land bank budget and taking it to council with a land bank commission recommendation is that the council can accept or reject the budget in its entirety. They don't have the option of doing line item vetoes. They can refer it back to the commission with a note if there's some issue that they have with it, but they have to accept or reject in its entirety.
Aaron has his hand up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up with what Lincoln is saying, and this is not unique to our municipality. This is state. The state auditors run budgeting and coding based on the BARS system. As Lincoln said, we can't just create a bar, have a BARS line created and throw a number in there, like he said, and with no detail. They won't accept that. So it is unique when it comes to acquisition, is that they do have to be specific, and that is based on state requirements, not just how we operate in budgets or how our municipality does, but what the state sets for a guideline across all municipalities.
Okay, Jim, David, I didn't know who raised it first, but we'll see what Jim says.
My next question is, in looking at the Land Bank Conservation Area Fund cash projections to 2026, which is a spreadsheet that was sent out separately from the meeting materials. Was this done before or after these proposed budgets, biennial budgets, because the numbers don't jive? I mean, I'm just looking at the 2022 and 2023 cash projections, even 2021. The REIT number on this one is 6 million. And then the acquisition costs are different in the 2022 number. I'm just wondering, yeah, for consistency's sake, looking at these cash projections, I guess they can be revised once we have approved the proposed biennial budget, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So we've got some projections there, and on that sheet, we're thinking we're going to end up with more REIT revenue than even the 5.5. We're proposing changing the 2021 budget to, but we're not sure. You know, it's a shot in the dark based on what sales have been like up to this point in the year. So I think it's better for us to be slightly conservative in that regard. However, when the commission's going to look at what we think is going to happen in the future and going to consider some of these acquisitions, which we don't have purchase and sale agreements on, but we've got estimates for what it might cost, then we want to provide you with a full complement of information in that regard. So it'll change those other numbers as well as we add potential acquisition projects. And we're just trying to give you an idea of what will happen with cash flow if we add those projects.
Okay, so we can get a revised cash projections once we get these budgets approved, and have that jive with this cash flow protection, cash flow projection, because we're looking at two different things here, and it'd be nice to have them line up.
Yeah, the projection that was sent out separately to you guys is an internal document that gives us an idea and you guys an idea of projects, you know, that we're considering and how they would play into the scenario, as opposed to what we're actually sending to the auditors for the official proposals and amended budgets. It's kind of our internal document for projections to play around with different acquisitions and where we hope to end up with REIT at the end of the year. So it is a different document in that sense.
Okay, I still think that they should line up. I mean, once we approve the budgets, those numbers should be on here, because the acquisition costs are way off on what the proposed budgets are. You know, it affects decision making. I think we should have on our cash projections what we've budgeted, and I don't know. It just seems confusing, potentially.
Can we go to David?
Yeah, Lincoln, on the biennial budget that you were showing last, there's a number for stewardship at the bottom of the expenditures. It's around $2 million. Does that represent actual expenditures for stewardship in a given year, or is it that some of that money is being set aside?
So that is just contributions to stewardship, ongoing stewardship activity. It's not about setting aside money for the stewardship endowment. I was going to get to the stewardship fund budget next.
Thank you.
Do you want to continue on with that or take a break and come back and get into stewardship?
I'm fine continuing or taking a break. Either one, it's up to you.
It's finished.
Finish. Okay, go ahead and proceed on.
So here's the stewardship and management fund budget proposal for 22 and 23. And as David was pointing out, you can see here on this operations transfers line, sorry, I'll blow that up so you can see it easier. The operations transfers line, going back, this is the 2019 number. This is where we are in 2021 with the last amended budget. So 2022 is here and 2023 is here. So you can see these significant increases that we're proposing. And this is really around, this is where the memo I gave you comes into play to highlight some of the things that these expenditures are going for. So the big categories are for infrastructure, public access infrastructure, primarily improvements on San Juan for Beaverton Marsh and Zylstra Lake. And then some equipment increases, and then also looking at doing forestry assessments and beginning to do some of the forest management projects as we expect to come out of those assessments. So that's how we're getting up into these big numbers. I would say that the hope here is that this is more of a bump than a permanent increase in expenditure. That we, for example, with these public access infrastructure projects, we get through those things and then those are not going to be ongoing costs, but it's about getting a property ready for public access or to put in particular infrastructure improvements. And one of the big ones there is the $250,000 item for a boardwalk at Beaverton Marsh to get across the marsh. Similarly, with a forest management, what we're aiming for is to go from a really a restorative phase where we need to get in and do some forest thinning and fuels reduction and things like that. Once we do that, we'll be in a management phase where our costs will drop significantly over time. So, having said that, well, this is good. See, my problem is I'm having to display this in Word form because it's blurry when I try and convert it into a PowerPoint slide. So you can't read that either. But you have this in front of you. This is the spreadsheet of expenditures. I think everyone's received that, and that's gone out to the public as well. So I think I'm just ready to, I'll stop there and take questions.
Well, here's a general question, which is just about managing time for staff. Do you feel like there's sufficient enough people to do all the work that's in there?
Well, we are proposing a slight increase in hiring a seasonal person, predominantly for Lopez at 0.4 FTE. And it may be that we're going to need to hire some additional seasonal people for other areas too. But that's what we've got so far. I don't foresee a big increase in stewardship staffing, but certainly around the edges there, just to get the the, the basic work done.
Jim? You're mute.
I should have taken my raised hand down, sorry.
Okay, okay. So I don't see anyone else with their hand up, so I'll start with some questions. So I personally don't feel ready to make a decision or be able to vote on the 2022-23 budget, mainly for the stewardship portion of it. I'm assuming these projections and projects came forth from the stewards. I'm wondering, have we spent $300,000 on a public access project before? You know, the last I saw, we had a conceptual drawing for a boardwalk across Beaverton Marsh. And was that promised to the public as part of the initial, the Preservation Trust fundraising, or just going back to, for example, the POLIS results? I guess I'm looking at the list and I see that I'd almost like to see a pie chart that shows, well, what amount or what percentage is going towards public access and infrastructure projects versus actual stewardship type projects. I don't really feel fully ready to make a decision on 2023. There's some big dollars here. I'm not saying they're not important, but it feels a little too quick. I'd like to know more and ask more questions.
Well, we can certainly provide you with more information, and I don't think we actually need to approve this budget in this meeting. We can come back to it in October, which will still precede the council vote on it. So we can certainly do that if you prefer, and compile more information for you.
I'd like to know what some other commissioners think.
Lincoln, when you, sorry, go ahead, Krista.
I would say that, as I recall, that Beaverton Marsh and some kind of a boardwalk to connect a couple of those pieces has been talked about for a long time. I don't know. And that was one of the reasons as we went into that acquisition, that with the understanding that something would have to be constructed to allow access in between a couple parcels, as I recall. So I think the focus has been there. I can't speak to the 250,000. So getting a breakdown of that or some kind of an estimate of what that means would be great. And I think we do have time to bring this back. I think October is the last meeting, though, if we're going to meet the county timeline for submitting approved budgets and whatnot. It has to happen in October. So everyone should know that.
Brian?
Sandy, just in answer to your question about other commissioners' feelings, I personally have no problem with the stewardship budget. We have a lot of big projects to do, and that's clear. We need equipment. We need to devote time to them. On the subject of the Beaverton Boardwalk, I generally have mixed feelings about boardwalks in general for a number of reasons. But as Krista just said, it's clear that this has been a part of the project, and as far as I know, that's going to be the only access across the marsh. So if we want to provide public access, as is in the plan, we kind of have to do that boardwalk, I think.
Yeah, it really is a key feature. I mean, one of the selling points of this project, not just in the Preservation Trust literature, but also talking to the council and the public about it, is this connection from town. So if we're going to use Lindy Park as a trailhead, which makes a lot of sense because there's a big parking area there and restrooms, and we've been talking to Island Rec about this, and they're totally amenable to that idea. What that means is we're going to have to get people across the marsh. And so this is the only possibility we've got to make that happen. We don't really know, we don't have a terribly firm number, frankly, on what that boardwalk is going to cost. We had some preliminary estimates done, but we still have geotech work to do on it. And also, similar to the forest management items we've got, the things that we don't know are about potential revenue sources for all of that. We're definitely seeing the potential for more revenue coming to us to do more forest management work, which is great. It started with this large-scale restoration area grant, and now we've got a follow-up one through the Conservation District, and we're anticipating significantly more funding on that side of things. For this boardwalk, this may very well be a good trails grant project that we can propose to the state and cover it that way, but it's almost certainly not going to be cheap. Hopefully we can find money to pay for it, but there it is.
Is this going to be part of the theoretically part of the old military trail?
At Beaverton, no. And I say that hesitatingly because the old military road trail project is one where they're really just trying to create a north-south connection. They're not trying to follow the specific route of the old military road. So if it happens that we end up with a trail that connects over to this part of the island and goes south from there, it could be. It's not, they aren't talking about that at this point.
David.
So I'm in favor of the improvements that you're talking about, the boardwalk and things like that, but I'm not sure that I see like a balance between maintenance of existing properties and some of the bigger projects that have gotten talked about, you know, here and there a little bit, like forest thinning and soil health kind of stuff, maybe the dams at Zylstra, other things. You mentioned that you hoped that the high stewardship expenses were a blip and they would go back down, but I don't have a sense of what it takes ongoing to do some of these larger scale stewardship things that I wonder, I don't know, I wonder if we need to be putting more resources into those things. Since I've been here, we really haven't had a significant reckoning of any of that kind of stuff. I mean, I've heard Peter say that forest management stuff at Turtleback could be several $1 million if he was able to do everything he wants to do or could possibly see needing to do. So are we addressing that, and how? We're often looking at new projects going forward, but I don't see the part I'm talking about here as being so much in focus. And I recognize that, I mean, new projects are really, really important. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't do that. I think that the more we can conserve, the better, but I also want to make sure that we're addressing the significant stewardship needs that, you know, they kind of creep up over time. We have to have resources for that. I think I'd like to hear other commissioners' views on that.
Okay. Peter, I guess, wanted to respond to that. You're muted.
Obviously not a commissioner, but
Yeah.
I think Lincoln alluded to, other sources of revenue. I mean, I do think that there's a ton of work that we can do in our forests, and that work is expensive. But we are pursuing, I will be pursuing grants, and also there's the Reservation Trust Stewardship Endowment for Turtleback, which I'm hoping we'll be able to access to some extent. Yeah, so it's some of that will be accounted for with other funding, I'm hoping.
I have a couple of, yes, Brian.
Just wanted to say to David, I think a lot of those projected expenditures are covered in the memo that Lincoln sent out yesterday on the detailing the stewardship expenditures. We have a lot to do, particularly in terms of forest management, climate change, and then
I think what I'm hearing David say is, so we do have what, $265,000 for, let's see, that would be in 2023 for forest management across all preserves. It's what you were talking about, David, was the blip that really actually we're looking at spending that kind of volume or this kind of volume moving forward if we're going to ramp up stewardship projects. It's not necessarily just going to drop off. That's looking beyond 2022 and 23.
Yeah, what I would anticipate beyond 2023 is that the funding increase we're seeing for public access infrastructure
I see.
will decrease. That may be replaced by doing an increased efforts in forest management. Our hope is that we can find resources to do that, to accomplish those goals. But that stewardship number approaching 2 million could stay there for a period of time. I don't think that's the long-term number that we should expect, but definitely for 2023, that's quite possible, and the next couple of years beyond that.
So can we ask specific questions? Like I have some questions about the what's listed for Kaufelt Farm. Do we have electrical budgeted that came up again that we haven't addressed yet? Is that to do electrical repairs to make that safe? Maybe Peter can answer that. Is that part of the improvements planned?
Yeah, there's a small amount of money in the budget, a rough estimate at this point. We're one of the final elements of the lease rate and reserve study at Kaufelt is an assessment by an electrician. So I'm hoping we'll get that sometime in the next few weeks, and that'll inform the budgeting, particularly going out a few years, because we're not going to get it all done right away. But yeah, I think we have funds in place for some initial work in the budget already. I think should be hopefully enough to address the more immediate issues.
And so I see there's a couple of wetland delineations laid out. Have we not done those before? Do we have other preserves that need wetland delineations? Just want to make sure that we're protecting our water resources.
at least for the Orcas ones, I would just say that those are related to specific projects, just identifying the wetland boundaries so that we can succeed with our permit applications. In one case, the trail at Coffell, in another case, the proposed work at Jet Cove.
Yeah, similarly for Beaverton, that's what we're talking about. It's for permitting purposes for, I mean, obviously, we're going to have to go through a big permitting process for that boardwalk, but other things as well.
And at Judd Cove, what is this channel stabilization? Is there, what needs, I'm just curious what that is.
You may recall I did a grant application, RCO grant application, almost a couple of years ago now, to restore the shoreline area by the lime kiln and to address an eroding culvert that basically comes out of the top of the slope and spills down, you know, constantly eroding that slope during the winter. And I was trying to replace that culvert, move the stream back to its original alignment, so it doesn't have to drop down that steep slope. I got funds for the shoreline portion of the project, but not the channel. So I'm still looking at how to address the channel issues, maybe more cost effectively. One issue is the state requires all culverts to be fish passable, and it's really not a fish bearing stream. So I've been trying to get a fish biologist out there to hopefully agree with me that it could be a more modest sized culvert and could cut the cost in half. So I'm hoping that we can fund that, you know, using our stewardship funds, but that project wouldn't happen until 2023 at the earliest, based on permitting and other issues.
All right. Well, I see that I've got us going way over time. So I just want to say I'm not opposed to investing this amount in stewardship at all. I just want to better understand what chunk is public access, what chunk is moving other restoration projects forward, and maybe, like David is saying, what isn't getting addressed? Do we have enough in there for weed management and those things? So I feel like I have a list of more questions, but we're running out of time. So maybe we could all submit some more questions or get those answered over the next month so that I could feel better prepared for the October meeting. Does that sound good?
Yeah, and I just had a comment to respond to David's question to the commission. So I guess I'm wondering, I don't remember seeing a detailed breakdown like we got with this draft budget with the 3 districts and all their professional fees, capital improvements and whatnot. So in addition to that detail, David, is there something else that you would want specifically that could be added to that format that would answer the question about ongoing? Do you want staff allocation costs on each of those districts? Or what would be helpful?
Let me be clear about one thing. I did not look over what Lincoln sent last night. I didn't finish work until 9 p.m. And so I've got to look at that. Don't know. I don't have an answer to your question at this point. But in general, I want to make sure we're not kicking any cans down the road at all.
Well, I like the format of this particular page that came at the end of the draft budget with each of the districts kind of detailed out for each year and what the projects were. So that to me is helpful. And if that can be used to add additional detail that might answer your question, maybe that's where we could put it, since there's a lot of work in that document or that page already.
Sounds good.
That's it.
Okay, so why don't we take just a very, I know we're behind, so let's just take I'm sorry, Brian, yeah.
Cindy, I'm sorry, time regardless. If we're agreed on continuing the budget till the next meeting, I wonder if it would be worthwhile to open the public hearing and hear if there are any questions from the public, just so we can have those addressed hopefully before the next.
That's a great idea, Brian. Thanks for bringing that up. So we'll open it up to any members of the public who have been able to review this and ask some questions. And of course, also know that you too can, over the next month, submit questions and ask for more clarification. But if you have any right now, please raise your hand. Okay, we're good to go. So why don't we take a 5-minute break and come back right at 10:30.
Perfect.
Is okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do the director's report with acquisitions.
Sure. I've got a very brief report, since a lot of this we will need to go over in executive session. But just a few things to highlight. One, on the Higgins property on Lopez, I'm continuing to talk to the family about their idea of trying to purchase it with a conservation easement. I continue to think that that's not really a viable option, but I think given that's their inclination, I will continue to talk to them about it. I'll also say that I've had very promising conversations with the Conservation Fund and with the Bureau of Land Management. So I'll fill you in on those more in executive session. With regard to the resale of the property at Entrance Mountain, I was very late getting back to those folks to talk about it, and we haven't really connected yet. So I'll have to give you an update in the next meeting. Lastly, I did have a conversation with Steve and Sarah Hauschka on San Juan, and so they continue to be interested in selling their property, whether it's the property by Mount Grant or the Katy Mountain property or some portion of those. I reassured him that we have definite interest, but they are going to go back and take a look at the numbers again. You might remember we got a proposal from them, but that's probably at least 3 years old now, so it's no longer relevant. So they're going to look at numbers, and then we'll have a conversation probably within the next month or so. So I'll be back to you with that one too. And that's really about it. Everything else is all about numbers.
Okay.
It looks like Amanda Zeus has a question.
Is that okay?
Sure. If you, it's.
I just wanted,
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about the Entrance Mountain resale. I just saw it as a line item, and I wondered what its relationship is to the Conservation Buyer Program. I looked on the website and I couldn't find anything about that program right now, but maybe it's hidden away. So was this property on that list?
Yeah, it's always been on that resale list. Amanda, it's the 10-acre parcel that's separated from the rest of Entrance Mountain. And when it was purchased originally, the idea was to resell it with a conservation easement that either eliminated all development or really regulated where development could happen on the property. So at the last meeting, the commission decided that resale with a Forever Wild conservation easement seems like a good approach. We have a neighbor who's very interested in purchasing that property. So we're just in discussions with them.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sure. Okay, do we have a stewardship report? Is that Aaron or who would that be?
I think anyone that wants to contribute.
Okay.
I can offer that I've been checking easements, went to Blakely, and there's a lot on Orcas, and it's been really positive so far. And then continuing on, I think as the stewardship report captures, trying to sort out where the funding is for the Department of Natural Resources, our forest work, and how to tie that in to projects for the stewards. I think maybe I'll just keep it at that in case there's other stewards that want to report.
Don't really have anything to add, but happy to answer any questions.
Is there a stewardship report this in the packet?
There is.
Wow.
It's a big packet.
I'm not finding it, but I'll look for it. There was a memo from Lincoln on stewardship strategy and expenses, but
No, in the meeting materials with that Aaron sent out, it's attached to that.
huh,
It's
okay.
either right, it's right or before or after Kai's report, I thought.
Right. Yeah, sorry, we definitely deluged you all with paper this month.
It's page 33, Jim, if you're looking at it on the PDF.
Yeah, it's page 33 of 60.
Yeah.
It follows the last page of the 22-23 budget.
Oh, there it is. Sorry, my bad.
I appreciated the stewardship report because that's how I found out about the plant sale again this year and got my order in before the cutoff. So
Good.
I love the report overall, but that was a take home for me. So appreciate that detail.
I guess I'll offer too that Amanda has been our help us get some new software, which I've been working with conservation easement. So now that I'm just now working with it, I'd like to thank Amanda for her hard work in bringing us that program, this landscape program. And then I guess lastly, really all three field assistants contributed to this stewardship report, which was a first, and it was wonderful. I think when you read it, you can hear their voices there too.
Well,
Okay.
I had
Go ahead, Miles.
I had a question about the mooring buoys at Watmau Bay. So is that something that I guess I was unsure about who manages those, since it's they're on the water. How does that work for ownership or management? Is it Land Bank? Is it BLM? Is it, who does that?
Hey, Miles, it's Amanda. The land bank has a lease through DNR for the placement of the 3 mooring buoys, but we installed and maintain them.
Okay. Yeah, there's both positive and negative feedback about them. So, which is not unusual, but yeah, as far as what do you think of as a suitable number of buoys to have in Watmau Bay?
Well, I put it in the stewardship report that so we have these 3 buoys, and the issue and the need for them in Watmau Bay is that boats have been anchoring in the eelgrass bed. And so we were able to get a grant to install kind of eelgrass friendly mooring buoys. And they're free. So they're constantly in use. They get a lot of use, but there's still quite a few boats anchoring there. I'd say on average, I see about 10 boats in Watmau Bay throughout the summer. And, you know, somebody asked, well, can there be a limit on anchoring? And I guess that would have to go through the state to make that determination. But for now, the mooring buoys provide a solution to protecting those eelgrass beds.
Okay, thank you.
The additional boats that are not on the buoys, they're still anchoring in the eelgrass.
Yeah, there was also a campaign by Friends of the San Juan, a boater campaign to anchor out to protect the eelgrass beds, and but it's not, there's still boats anchoring in the eelgrass beds. Yeah.
Okay, Brian, you have a question or comment?
No.
Do you? No, I have my own hand over your. Okay, never mind.
I have a question or kind of
Yeah.
a comment, like, because I'm kind of wondering if not that I'm advocating putting more buoys in, but if you put in more buoys, that would limit, you have to have a certain amount of space in between buoys to allow for boats to swing and whatnot. And so if we were able to put in the capacity of buoys that would prevent anchoring, I don't know how far out that anchor, the shoreline goes that's actually available to drop anchor. But if we had enough buoys that would accommodate that area and allow for swing on boats, I think it would prevent people from dropping anchor. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. Just
That was the thought originally, that we had all those boats out there and setting out those mooring buoys at the intervals we set them. The thought was, well, if we've got, and there's another mooring, like a mystery mooring buoy out there too. If we've got boats on those buoys, you really can't anchor too much. However, it doesn't go out to the full extent of the eelgrass bed. So, we've got people out beyond. And of course, this has all become very much intensified with the closure of Canada. So all the people who are frustrated about not getting to take their boat to Canada end up here. And it's a difficult situation.
So thank you again for the comprehensive stewardship report and for the ease of format. It's just very engaging to read. And so with that, with no more questions, we could go to Tanya for the outreach and volunteer report.
Sorry, I'm standing today. I don't really have anything else to add except a correction to my piece in the report. I was incorrect. The Board of Commissioners for the Island Rec Board of Commissioners has not approved the Adopt a Trail program as of yet. They'd like to revisit it in spring, and their fear of perhaps overloading already overwhelmed staff. I didn't make the meeting, but we had a great conversation with Maddie, their director. So I think the board is being a little cautious. They are worried about their staff. So we'll revisit it in the spring. I think everybody's on board with the idea, just to make sure that there's enough capacity on their side as well. And still just planning for Orca Recovery Day on the 16th. We've got the Great Islands cleanup coming up on the 25th. And thank you, Krista. Today is the last day to order plants. Eliza really stepped it up this year. And so, so far, nobody's been turned away. I think last fall when we introduced it, we sold out in 48 hours. And right now, I think there's only maybe 5 varieties, newer varieties that have sold out, but there's still plenty.
Tanya, can you talk about the November date and format for the community conversation?
We're going to have a community.
Just make an announcement for the public. Yeah.
I still don't know. think you're gonna end up seeing the back of my head. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I think it's November 10th is the date.
Yeah, Tanya, that's what you shared.
Is that what it, okay, so November 10th, and as far as I know, everybody's on board to do it again like we did last time in the evening. I haven't set anything up yet, but the communications committee still will decide, I think, on a topic, but it'll be all county and it'll be Zoom, it'll be virtual. So hopefully we'll have a lot of participation. Brian.
Brian.
Yeah, Tanya, I just looked at my calendar, and if I'm right, somebody, I'm not sure who it is, possibly county council, somebody is having a town hall on housing on November 10th.
Oh, okay.
So
Thank
we
you.
will be competing. Can you check that out? Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
so
then we may be adjusting that time.
thanks for letting us know, Brian.
Or day is also possible.
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah, Dave.
Should we send out, I think it's probably we should start by polling the commission to make sure people's schedules align with some day that week.
Okay. Sounds good. And then trying to make sure there isn't another big conflict. Okay, so at this point, we're going to move into executive session to discuss the acquisition of real estate. So we will stop the recording, and if you're a member of the public, please log off. Yeah, okay, good, Tanya. Okay. All right, so we're back in session to discuss future agenda items for October meeting. So can we plan?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, well, you lost the boss.
Mm. Well, while she's missing in action, I think she was going to say something about planning the next community meeting. So we need to get that date straight. We also have the question of our annual retreat and when that is going to be.
Yeah.
And do we think for that annual retreat, the whole discussion of Coughout Farm is still sitting out there? Will we have final figures from the appraisal guy for October?
I think we will. It's just, it's coming down to this one electrician who, you know, is overextended, but I believe we will have that final report sometime soon, next couple of weeks, maybe, hopefully. At least a draft.
So do we think we want to do our retreat in October, or should we play it safe and plan that for November when we know we would have that document? That's assuming we're going to put Coughout as our main retreat topic.
Well, I think November makes more sense, but that's my vote.
Yeah, that's fine.
Coughout as the sole topic seems like a lot to me. A lot of Coughout.
Yeah, I mean, why is Coughout going to dominate the retreat? We have lots of things to talk about.
Well, we put it off for several months, awaiting all the documentation and appraisal information so that we can talk about it all at once. So in my mind, it would be at least of a full day retreat, it would be a morning or an afternoon discussion. It's what we're using to move forward on how we're going to fund and develop a long-term lease agreement. So
we had talked about having a separate special meeting on Caulfield. Having it as a topic on the annual retreat would be one approach to it. My feeling is that there are other topics too that we really want to focus on the retreat. One being the whole kind of analysis and discussion of the POLIS survey that we just saw, and continuing public outreach approaching the REIT renewal. Are we on course? As I feel, personally that the results of the survey show that we pretty much are. But I think we should take more of a look and have some more discussion on that, as well as on future stewardship topics, particularly around climate change. I mean, things are changing. So maybe we can do all three at the retreat. I don't know.
well, I'm not opposed to having a special meeting for Caulfield either.
I think that'd be a better approach, in my opinion.
Sure.
Separate meeting.
Yeah, I just want to have the discussion, leave ample time to have that discussion. So
Yes.
I don't really care where it happens.
So how are we going to schedule that? We're waiting for the appraisal and the resource report. We'll need to set a meeting separate from a regular monthly meeting, and maybe separate from the retreat.
Well, we can wait and do that after Peter confirms receipt of the report. That seems to be, let's do that. Peter says that sounds good.
And that's somewhat imminent. Like, I mean, this meeting could happen this year.
Yes, I mean, he has a contractual deadline, and if this electrician doesn't come through, we're gonna have to move ahead in some other way, but yeah, we're determined to get it, and I'd say in the next several weeks, at least to get that draft.
If you could find an electrician to come through right now, let me know who it is.
Yeah.
Shouldn't a special meeting about Caulfield Farm be not commission-wide, but the Orcas commissioners? It just
No. Don't you think all of us we're all going to vote on how much we plan to spend on
Well, yeah, but
Caulfield
I
and
mean,
how we
just-
plan to do that lease? It seems like it's all the commissioners need to participate in that.
yeah, but there should be a recommendation on what we should do from the Orcas commissioners. That's typically how we've done things. So we don't have to all digest everything and about Caulfield. I mean, it just seems like here we are, the entire commission spending all this extra time talking about an Orcas property.
I think well, my personal feeling about it is that we're right at the point where we're going to tap it in. Like, I feel like one more 4-hour meeting or 2-hour meeting about Caulfield to figure out the logistics. I feel like it's more at this point less a philosophical discussion and more like a logistical discussion of like, what do we want to put on the RFP, or what do we want to put on the lease? And personally, I would like to contribute to that, having been in some of those conversations and knowing that it's going to come up in other properties anyways, if not this intense, but something. So I personally would like to be involved in that. And I do feel like, I agree with you, Jim. I think that the Caulfield has received an inordinate amount of time on our part, but I also feel like we're at the finish line for it. And just dedicating that amount of time, we can just kind of nail it in, is how I feel about it.
Well, to think that we're at the finish line, I think is probably a mistake. We've never been at the finish line with regards to Caulfield.
I feel like we're pretty close. I feel like it's a concentrated effort over the hump. And yeah, I mean, we're not gonna be done with it, but as far as narrowing it in, I feel like we're narrowing it down to something that can carry itself and have not as, we don't need, I feel like this is our last big discussion on it, is what I feel like personally, so.
Okay,
Brian?
well,
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know that Sandy just called. She has been having trouble getting back in. So Krista, you're it.
Okay, sounds good. I think that if everyone else, I note Jim's opposition to having the whole commission together, but is there a consensus from the rest of the commissioners on participating, how they want to participate in the next stage of the Caulfield discussion? I personally would like all the commission to be there, or at least I want to, as Miles said, I want to participate in that.
I agree absolutely. One of the failures of Caulfield in the past, in my view, has been that the whole commission has not fully committed and stood behind it. So I think we really do need to have a consensus of the whole commission. I'm fine with the Orcas commissioners making a recommendation, but I think everybody needs to be included and everybody needs to be heard.
David?
Yeah, I'd like to participate in that, and I think it'd be fine to have Orcas commissioners meet separately in advance and try to hammer out some of the main points. But I think there's there's philosophical questions about COFELP that we all need to discuss and agree on answers to.
And plus the whole appraisal document itself is going to can be a significant budgetary line item going into the future, which I think the whole commission has to weigh in on. So, okay, we can't speak for Doug, but and Sandy's trying to join us. So
There she is.
there she is. Sandy, we were just having a discussion about whether or not the whole commission needs to participate in the next discussion around Caulfield. And so far, Jim is less interested in having that done. It would rather have Orcas commissioners digest it and make a recommendation to the commission. And the other commissioners on the call would like to participate in that next discussion. Tag, you're it.
Are we talking about reviewing the assessment that comes back and then deciding how to move forward?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the responsibility of the whole commission. We've been presenting the data. The commission has been being kept up to date. I think things that get into like specifics of lease negotiation and such, that could be smaller, but are we, we're talking about, I don't know, I think we need to see the assessment of what investments the farm needs. And it seems to me that we've had other commissioners participating. So I know Jim is worn out, but that's what happens when you're on the commission for 10 years. So, and you've heard about it for a long time. And
yeah,
but I think it's something the commission needs to participate in.
So the question was, or I won't say recommendation, but it was put out there that we set aside a special meeting for Caulfield and not make it part of the retreat.
Yes.
And that we wait for
Got
Peter
it.
to get back to us when he's actually got the final document in hand, and then we can set a date and time for that special meeting.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. Everybody is frozen except on my screen, except for Krista.
Oh,
I don't know why that
see her.
is.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. I'm having internet problems, I guess.
Yeah. Sandy,
Yes.
just in a nod to Jim's comment, I wonder if it would make sense going into that special meeting where everybody participates, if perhaps you and I and Lincoln and get together and kind of format the questions or topics of the discussion and perhaps make a recommendation on those things. I don't know whether, well, gosh, everybody has had a had a paddle in this too. Krista and Doug have been involved in the interview with the alums. Miles has been involved in a lot of this stuff, as you just pointed out. So my interest really is proceeding in an organized way, and that's really going to get something done at this point. And I think we are getting toward the end stages.
I think we are too. One thing that we had talked about was potentially having a facilitated discussion, but I guess even before we would decide to do that, we need to frame the big questions that we're trying to answer.
So who would like to do that?
To frame
I
questions.
mean, I'll volunteer. Yeah.
So we want more than, or we don't want more than 3 commissioners to participate in that little sub something. You want to have one commissioner from each island or for each district?
I
I'd
think
be
you
happy
and
to do that.
another commissioner.
What's that?
I think that it should be you and I and another commissioner and Lincoln.
Okay. Okay.
And-
All right. That's fine. Me and you and who else
David
would
just
like to?
volunteered.
David, excellent. All right. David's always a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I think your perspective will be good, David. I think
Yeah.
that's great.
He asks good questions. But so we're not to begin doing that until we've got the rest of the data. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
I'll keep you posted on that, so you can plan ahead a little bit.
Okay.
So the other thing we were
Okay,
talking
that
about when you
sounds
got
good.
disconnected was future agenda items, and we kind of got distracted with cough out, but we were looking at agenda items for October and potentially the retreat.
So one thing before, oh, my damn internet's stopping.
We could still hear you, Sandy.
Can you? Okay.
Yeah.
You know, so we're at 10 to 12 and I keep running over on other meetings. And is it inappropriate to say that our meetings are going to be 8:30 to 12 just to give a little more breathing room? Because I feel sometimes that we're cut short. And if we finished early, that would be okay. Isn't that right? Or do we have to finish at a certain, okay. I'd like to see that. If not 12, then 11:45, but we just can't seem to get through everything.
Sandy, we can always vote to extend a meeting if you want to keep it to 11:30. Either way works for me.
Okay, so we would decide that as an 11:30, that would,
Well, we'll Sandy, you and I will sit down and talk about the agenda. You actually get to set it because you're the chair.
okay. All right, so the future agenda, so I'd like to see more room around the 2022-23 budget. That would be one thing.
I think no
For
meeting should be more
October.
than an hour. But here we are talking about extending our 3-hour meeting.
Yeah.
Why don't we have another meeting about how to do the meeting?
I agree. We should meet to discuss.
Well, maybe I'm not facilitating this quickly enough. Maybe I need to pay more attention and keep us to a schedule, or we're not allowing enough time on certain things and spending too much time on other things. So maybe I need to do better.
I think you've done a great job.
You did fine.
You're doing fine,
Just
Sandy.
never know.
Yeah. Don't
Okay.
second guess that part of it.
I think the thing is, we have some big top, to me, that was the first time also that I saw the big spreadsheet of all the stewardship things, and I'm completely in favor of putting big resources. But when I see all the details, I have questions and I want to understand more, and I want to know, well, what are some of the downsides of this or that, or by doing this, are we giving something else up? So let's plan more time. What else was on the future agenda items? What else did you guys talk about?
Well, we didn't actually get to it. We just have your list that came out. It was part of the back second page of the
Oh.
agenda for this week's meeting. There's a whole bunch of stuff
Well,
there.
I think that, I mean, my impression is that October is going to be a full meeting, just continuing what we already have on our plate. If we're going to have the draft agricultural goals and policies, I would think we would have that next draft to be able to discuss. Am I right about that?
We should, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I think that might be important to get that done before we proceeded into Caulfield anyways.
Yeah. You're right, Sandy, that's a full meeting. I think what we need beyond that is a date certain for the annual retreat, and also for the Caulfield meeting, if that's going to be a separate meeting. So we need to pull the commissioners, and I think staff should start finding a date that works.
And the community meeting.
Yes. A lot of meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
I
so
guess
in the
my-
Caulfield meet. Go
Mike,
ahead.
let me just make a
Go ahead.
suggestion that it seems like we're obviously going to do the next October meeting. That's going to be a full meeting. We are talking about doing the community meeting on that second week in November. And probably we're going to want to do the Caulfield meeting not too far from that. We also have a November commission meeting. And then the annual retreat part of it, probably, I think we're probably looking at December, frankly.
So what about for the community conversation for this one that's going to be countywide? What if we make the draft the agricultural goals and policies and program, maybe, I mean, that's clearly controversial in the community with opposing opinions and a lot of undecided people. And we know we need to do our best and step up community engagement. So maybe that would be a good countywide community topic, as far as how much, where do we go with that program? Where do we continue going with it? What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
That would give us time to have our discussion in October, and then we'd want to have it out for at least several weeks for people to review and be able to comment. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes.
Sandy, I'd like to ask staff to also check the planning commission schedule, because I know over the next couple of months, around the comp plan. And so we don't want to conflict with that either. I don't have the dates right to hand. If I find them, I'll send them to you.
All right, well, we'll check on it.
Okay. And then are there, the only other thing, not that we need to, I just want to make sure that if there are any loose ends that came up from public comments, I think we addressed those today, but just to make sure that we don't let any little things slide. I think we got it covered.
We'll send Kathy an email about science efforts on land bank properties.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we've got a lot happening ahead.
Tanya had her hand up.
Tanya,
Tanya.
yes. Tanya, David, Tanya.
Just to be clear, I'm lost in all these meetings as I was taking the notes. I'm going to check that the week of November 10th is still my focus week. And I'll look against other planning commission meetings and things. But does that still sound like as far as a time frame, a week looking there?
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah. This is just going back to a couple things I heard today, and this is about responding to Kathy. Kathy asked essentially a pretty open question about the land bank's role in education. And then I heard Kai mention the same thing as something that came up in his survey. So there's something there to look at, in my opinion. I don't know how much we're currently actively involved in those things. Like, what are we doing specifically, aside from maybe giving people access? But I heard it twice today, so from two places.
Yes, it did come up in that survey. I noted that too. Thanks for bringing that up, that there's opportunities, especially with youth programs and students, but could be with other residents as well. Not necessarily that we have to run the programs, but that we could help put them together. So that's a good
I got the impression,
point.
I got the impression from Kathy that she was looking for us to share more of what we learn in our process of scientific evaluation and whatever efforts are being done in terms of stewardship and science on our preserves. I think
True.
she was looking to have us be a source in a sense of information that we have gleaned due to our scientific activities. Am I missing something?
No, you're right. I agree with you.
She brought up several ways to approach education. Both us disseminating information that we get from people that we allow to do research. She talked about having educational programs with students. So she was kind of throwing out a pretty wide net. And I think there are any number of options that we could look at that don't require us to run an educational program on our preserves.
Why don't we add that to our communications committee? I know we'll be prepping for the community conversation, but if it's something that maybe we could address by the end of the year and come up with recommendations for next year of how we might step up our engagement level in that way. I don't know if anyone heard me because you're all frozen.
No, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay. So what do you?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Could put it to the communications. You got that note, Tanya, that we can talk about it,
Yes.
review the comments and see if we can come up with some recommendations.
She's nodding.
Okay. She's frozen on my screen. So thank you for interpreting. Thanks
I
for
think-
bringing that up, David. And
I think communications should also take a kick at Kai's document before it comes back to the commission. Because it's clearly has impact on our communication strategy.
Right.
yes.
What do you mean, take a kick
Well,
at?
I think
Just-
the communication committee should look at, have some discussion about what we saw in his report and what recommendations or items we might present to the commission for further discussion. I
Okay.
mean, it was just, we just didn't get that much time at it, and
Yes, good point.
That
So
meeting
we
hour.
Yeah, we may need to have an extra communications meeting, one focused on planning for the November 10th-ish meeting, and then something else to, we may just not want to, we may need an extra meeting for all of us meeting lovers.
I'm here all day, every day.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, and basically what we've covered is that there's a lot of ground to cover still. Okay, but
Well put.
we're
Good.
doing it.
All right,
Okay,
thanks,
so
everybody.
at 12:01, we're adjourning.
already? Crazy.
Thanks.
Everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks everyone for